Utah politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Salt Lake Tribune political correspondent Brian Schott. He's here to preview the legislative session. Brian, always glad to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Always a pleasure, Glenn.
So you've been keeping a close eye on interim. So as we get closer and closer, now just a couple days out to the session beginning, what's the feeling this year going into it?
Well, you know, there's a lot of talk about tax cuts. They want to do that again. Back in December, the legislative leaders set aside $150 million for tax cuts, and that's a starting point. It could go much higher. The only thing that is going to put a limit on what they want to do in terms of tax cuts is, as you alluded to, inflation. The numbers that came out this week showing that inflation jumped 7% over the last year, it's freaking them out a little bit. They're really, really worried about that because that's going to really put a damper on the economy, on how much things cost, and so they're going to work really hard to balance both of those things. So you see a lot of enthusiasm for tax cuts, but inflation is just a cold water on that.
So we kind of have an idea with some of the bills that have already been filed as to how Republicans in the legislature are thinking as far as like income tax cuts and whatnot. But we have a lot of advocates saying, slow down, let's maybe use this money for important programs in the state of Utah. How do you see this all playing out in the end?
Tax cuts, the Republicans have already decided that they want to do tax cuts, so that's what's going to happen. When you see the Executive Appropriations Committee, which is the top budgeting committee in the entire legislature, set aside that money for tax cuts, then you're getting tax cuts. That's how it's going to work. They've already done most of the spending for education. They do that before the session. It's locked in because of the way that they changed the budgeting process a couple of years ago to head off the Our Schools Now budget initiative or ballot initiative. So you know, a lot of this stuff is already locked in. Now that doesn't mean that they're not going to be spending money on some of these programs, but if at this point they say that they're putting aside money for tax cuts is what is going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Let's take another subject that's really been getting a lot of attention, and that is this power struggle we're seeing play out between local governments and state legislators, specifically the mayors of Salt Lake County and Salt Lake City. We've seen the majority leader in the House, Representative Mike Schultz, come out and say, you know, that they do not have the authority to do the things they're doing as far as mask mandates, and we saw this playing out at the 4th of July with fireworks as well. He promised to take a look at this and possibly address it. What are we going to see happen there?
I think you're going to see the legislature assert its primacy up there. I was having a conversation with a member of legislative leadership last week about the Salt Lake County mask mandate. And I said to them, I thought the legislature was all about local control, because one of the things that they love saying is government that is closest to the people governs best. And they said to me, and I'm not going to give any names, but they said to me, we believe in local control until the locals need controlling. And that's pretty much how it works. The entire philosophy up there is when you look at cities and counties, they are political subdivisions of the state, and the legislature sets the policy for the state. So, you know, you'll hear them talk about local control until the locals do something that they don't like.
Yeah, and we saw that play out with the governor and Salt Lake County Mayor Jenny Wilson during the week with their dispute as to, you know, the impact of the county mandate on state buildings. Do you think, so you do think the legislature will maybe tie up some of these loopholes and limit some of the power of local mayors?
I'm guessing that they do something in regards to Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall. When she declared a mask mandate, there were a lot of people who thought that lawmakers were going to call a special session to override it or do something through the courts. Ultimately, they thought it wasn't that big of a deal, or it was the juice wasn't worth the squeeze at that point. But I do suspect that they're going to do something to clarify that a mayor does not have that ability.
Yeah. The last couple of years, we've seen transgender sports coming up, and we know that they've been working on that in the interim as well. Do you see the two sides coming together and possibly coming up with something that both might be able to get behind?
I do, because they have a bill that came out of the interim committee, and there was a lot of negotiation about that. I reported during last year's session that when this bill was making its way through the process, that the owner of the Utah Jazz, Ryan Smith, held a meeting with lawmakers behind the scenes and basically did a lot to slow it down, say we need to talk about this, we need to spend more time looking at it, and that's exactly what they did. And you know, ultimately, whatever bill comes out of it is probably going to not make everybody happy, but that's usually the sign of a good piece of legislation, or at least a sign that they tried to work together.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to get your thoughts on this as well. We're starting to see Silicon Slopes become more of a player on Utah's Capitol Hill, and in some cases calling out state lawmakers. Do you see perhaps a power struggle between those two entities playing out?
Yeah, but you know, so Silicon Slopes is one area of the state, and they've got a lot of money to throw around. But you know, just like any other legislative group or any other special interest group, you know, they'll push as far as lawmakers want them to push. If they try to go any farther, they're going to run into a brick wall, because the legislature as a whole, you know, you've got 104 individuals, and it's really hard it's really hard to get them going in one direction. So, you know, it takes good leadership, and to just think that you're going to come in and throw a bunch of money around in the way of campaign donations, or you're going to come in and have some paid lobbyists, that's not going to do it. You really have to get, you really have to have leadership on board.
Yeah. How is COVID going to impact this session? We're starting to see cases that we've never seen before, as far as the volume of them. Do you see a lot of remote activity taking place again this year?
Oh, no, I do not. You know, lawmakers have said to me that they need to start acting as if it's no longer a pandemic, but COVID is endemic, meaning it's going to be here. And I think that is the emerging conventional wisdom up on the Hill. They're not going to go remote unless there's like a huge reason to, unless there's an exigent thing that happens that causes them to do such.
Yeah, and back to something we brought up earlier, the state capitol right in the mix of that battle between the governor and the Salt Lake County mayor. So far, it is being exempt from the county.
I was up there. I was up there last week for a couple of things, and I think I was the only person wearing a mask.
Yeah. Brian, you do a great job covering the session. You'll be there every single day. 45 days. It's a little different this year in that it's starting on a Tuesday, ending on a Friday. But how can our viewers follow along your reporting and stay in touch with what's happening up on the Hill?
Well, they can always read the Trib, or they can sign up for my email newsletter. It's called The Rundown. It's in your email inbox every weekday morning by 6:30, and it's a great way to start your day.
And on Twitter?
Shot Happens.
I can follow you there, yep. All right. Hey, really appreciate your insight. Looking
Anytime,
forward to the session, and we will check in with you another time. Thanks for being here. Still ahead, we're going to